Real Ninja Religion or Spirituality with Stephen Nojiri. Okay, let's get into it.
So I'm Stephen Nojiri, author of Samurai Traditions of the Tada Genji, and Anthony has asked me to once again return to discuss the part 3 of this series, which would be Shinobi and Religion.
This is our playlist already, guys. Real Ninja Training and Real Ninja Psychology. Go and have a look at it.
So when discussing Shinobi and religion, the very first thing we have to say is that there are so many different potential combinations that you cannot say, oh, a shinobi would study this particular religion, a shinobi would be of this particular religion. Time period, location, family line, all of these things will make a huge impact on the actual religious practices of the shinobi. But in general, of course, we have to address the sort of the 4 main points. 1, Buddhism. 2, the amorphous collection of indigenous rites and rituals combined with imported Daoism, which is generically called Shinto, which isn't a real entity until the late 1600s. Then you have Daoism proper, and then you have Confucianism.
Nobody ever says this when they're talking about Japan, but Japan is a land of Indian religion. It's right out of India, it's Buddhism, right out of Buddhism. And in fact, you can actually trace back parts of it to the Indo-Europeans, which is a crazy notion. And then, believe it or not, and I know you're going to think I'm a wacky one, all you thingies out there, but you then even get the connection back to Druids. And I know you're going to go, what the? But basically, we have this idea of a religion starting in India, or not India, it's around that area for modern ideas, that goes that way, early before we're well talking about. And you even get Julius Caesar and people like that talking about how reincarnation is the way of the Celts, okay? And this passes this way, and it passes that way. Thousands of years before we're talking, yep? So you've got to put your head, that's your head in. Get this idea, you're doing Japanese things. Stephen's there talking about Shinto, but it becomes an all-catch term. It's like, or a catch-all term. Or it's not Buddhism, it's not Confucianism, it's not Daoism. Oh, look, Shinto. 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 That's pretty much what happens. So let's see what he's got to say next.
So then first we have to discuss, let's look at Buddhism for a moment. Japanese Buddhism is very distinct from Indian Buddhism. Or if you have to understand that Buddhism has a very long history, and that you basically have 2 major divisions of Buddhism. You have Indian Buddhism, which would be India, Kushan Empire, Tibet, Bhutan, Pakistan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That then also becomes like the Sri Lankan version, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. With all, of course, with different branches, but it's a Buddhism that keeps to the Indian roots. Then you have Buddhism, what they call Far East Asian Buddhism, which is still Buddhism, but when Buddhism went to China, it became distinct. So therefore, again, the Buddhism is the same, the Dharma is the same, but there's a very, very specific distinction between Indian Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism.
I've got a couple of things to say along the way on here, but so keep up with us. So basically, get yourself a copy of this, Samurai Traditions of the Tada Genji. This is Stephen Nojiri's book, Samurai Traditions of the Tada Genji. Get yourself a copy, yeah? So you can keep up with Stephen and stuff like that. And I've got another few things to say in a minute. So basically, I wish Stephen could say the word Buddhism right. Buddhism. It's not B-double-O. I don't know where Americans get Buddhism from. Buddhism. But it's Buddhism, mate. But, you know, I am from Manchester, so my U's have got a harsh sound. But it's so weird listening to people go, Buddhism. It's almost like he's got, like, you know, he's like, hi, Anthony, let me tell you about Buddhism. So, right, then what we've got to remember here is there is a baseline of Buddhism, okay? There's a baseline like that. But what you have to remember is it then fractures in. The Buddha starts here with his spirituality, yeah? Then, I was talking to Scott from Sengoku Studies and things like that about, I think I'm doing this from memory, Mappo, where the disintegration of Buddhism starts and the idea of the fracturing of it and the message, the spirituality starts to break up and collapse like this. And then you get lots of lineages. And this is meant to be a teaching within Buddhism as well, okay? So don't forget, Buddhism has a foundation, but it's like imagine a wall with lots of roots coming up it. The wall's there as the foundation, but all them roots are the different types of interpretations of that wall.
So, when discussing the Buddhism that would have been practiced by shinobi, one has to understand that it's not like you can just pick up any random book on Buddhism, especially a book about Indian Buddhism or Sri Lankan Buddhism or Cambodian Buddhism or Thai Buddhism or something like that. You can't really just pick that up and say, well, I'll just read this and I'll understand Buddhism. You can understand the Dharma, the sort of fundamental teachings, but you would not be understanding the Buddhism as it was for the shinobi by reading those books.
You want to really be going with Zen or starting to push yourself down the Zen route. A shinobi is from the warrior culture, yeah, and the warrior culture tended to focus towards Zen. There's other stuff included, but let's go down that route. But you've got to be careful of sloppy Zen. Don't just like, oh, I go sit in a corner for 5 minutes and I'm doing the... No, like Stephen says, you've got the Dharma, the teachings are there, yeah? You've got the Sangha, the community, your Buddhist community, which would be, in this case, a lot of your warrior friends, all studying Buddhism. And then you've got this idea of Zen, Zen is two focus, basically. You've got clarity of mind, and focus, and then you've got realization. So realization comes from clarity of focus, okay? So you need your core teachings of Buddhism, clarity of focus, realization next.
So, of course, we can round back and we can say some fundamental basics, of course. A shinobi of the classical period would, and therefore you attempting to walk in the footsteps of the shinobi, should have a decent understanding of karma, reincarnation, suffering, cause and effect, things like that. Those fundamental points that no matter what school of Buddhism you're from, fundamentally there is the idea that of suffering and the cause of suffering and the cessation of suffering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And because Japan falls perfectly into what is commonly known Mahayana. Again, it's keeping it simple for these videos is difficult for me because I want to go off on tangents and explain all of these terms in detail, but keeping it incredibly simple, because Anthony has asked me to keep it incredibly simple. Japan is Mahayana Buddhism. And again, I won't go on a 4-hour speech about what that really means. But because it's Mahayana Buddhism, therefore you would also need to be focused on the idea of the 6 perfections. Now, so with the 6 perfections, an understanding of karma, taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, so refuge, 4 noble truths, 8-fold path, 6 perfections, things like that. Those would be, you would need to gain an understanding and some form of application of those.
For your ninja training, you need to look at layers. I've always said this at the beginning. It's like a brick wall. I said this years ago. It's a brick wall. You've got a solid foundation below. Yep. Not just on sand. It's like rocks below you. Then a smooth surface and you start building your bricks. And this is part of those bricks. And it becomes the wall that becomes your training. Okay? So you've got to be a stable person first. You've got to have a good body. You've got to be, as flexible as you can, as keep your body as, trim as you can possibly do. And then you've got to keep your mind trim and you've got to start building those layers up. Of course, it's not as easy as I'm saying. Nobody perfects this, but the idea is that's where you're pushing towards. And the Jonin, the best ninja ever, everyone out of us, the Jonin style thing is those who are really, really on the ball top. And I'll give you an example of this. I once saw a documentary on yoga, and there was some really, really terrible yoga people all like spouting this. And then you saw one guy who didn't say a word, just ripped as anything, just doing all the positions and everything, just sat in his little library reading. And you're like, there's the difference. Okay, there's the difference.
But now we need to take the moment to be absolutely clear here. Just because that's the type of Buddhism at the time does not necessarily, again, does not mean that all shinobi are going to be believing it or following it. So what we're talking about here is just a generic platform for someone to sort of start with. But there are undoubtedly many historical shinobi that did not know these details or didn't care about these details. They may have been sort of expected to know them because of where they lived and where family they were from, but they may not have cared.
This is the forced to church idea. So sometimes people are forced into church because community says you got to go to church, but you might be like, no. But let's keep it towards people who are interested in this. And I'm actually shocked Stephen said that, to be honest. Most people in the medieval period would have been, not all of them, like he says, but also because you know that usually is like pushes it that way, and he's moved it slightly that way. Ooh, gone the other way, Stephen. So right, you would even and undoubtedly have had Christian shinobi, in my opinion, without a doubt. There is something like, if I remember rightly from my research, 100,000 Christians in about the 1550s, 1590s. There's 100,000 Christians in Japan. Entire places were turning to Christianity because of the Jesuit, in fact, Catholicism. So there's most likely being a shinobi who went out there with a cross and did his missions with a cross. The odds of it are high, basically.
So, I could go on and on and on about the different types of Buddhism and the development of Buddhism and why some Japanese Buddhism is very different from Indian Buddhism, etc., but that's not really what you guys want. You want a clear and concise answer. If you're studying shinobi arts, if you're trying to be a modern day shinobi, what type of Buddhism? And I would say, because my focus is on Kusunokiru, Natoriru, Taragenji, etc. Now, I am not speaking for all shinobi because remember, there is no one answer fits all. But for the Natori students or the Kusunoki students, Taragenji students, I would say you need to be obviously a very basic fundamental platform of Buddhism, which would not necessarily determine what school, But starting off with picking a school, picking a historical school, I would pick Shingon. And the reason is because Shingon view and Shingon practice has the most imprint on the Kusunoki tradition, and you see its imprint even in the Natori tradition, and you see it in the Taragenji tradition, and you see it in a lot of other shinobi traditions like Fujibayashi sensei with the Bansenshukai. You can see a footprint of esoteric Shingon Buddhism onto that document as well. And several other shinobi documents seem to have this imprint, this Shingon or this esoteric Buddhist imprint. You can study Zen and Pure Land and Nichiren, okay, sure, but the shinobi documents really seem to be imprinted most by the esoteric, spell-casting, Shingon type Buddhism.
Now, I would slightly disagree with Stephen here. Not that he is wrong by any means. Like, the point we're making in this video is there is no one way you're going to do it. I would start with what is base level. Like he has said, the karma, dharma, the six perfections, the eight noble paths, the eightfold path, the four noble truths, etc. Then I would stray over towards Zen, just to get yourself a bit more equated with moving it beyond just that. And then I would go over to Shingon. It doesn't mean you have to wait to do those. You can go and get books on all of that, guys, and just do it. But my point is you wanna flow it up there. If you jump straight into Shingon, you might be like, ooh, because it is a nightmare. It's totally like, what is going on? Whereas Stephen is literally a Buddhist, straight out Buddhist. And just to be aware, if you really want to do this properly, you should join a Buddhist center. You should take the vows of whatever, the lay vows, and then you should follow Buddhism. Actually do it. Yep. Not just read the books, you should actually go and do it, and then follow the Zen path, do all of that stuff. Okay, so but just I hope you're feeling we're getting a building of the spirituality going there.
So therefore, now that we've discussed the idea that the student needs to have this fundamental platform of Buddhism, then moving from there, we can look at what you guys call Shinto, which is actually an amorphous collection of indigenous rituals and rites mixed with Daoism. So at this point, right here, right now, we're going to blend the esoteric aspects of Buddhism with Shinto and Daoism and basically say magic and ritual. Regardless of where the shinobi comes from, pretty much every shinobi tradition that's at least got a record of it, a recorded tradition, teachings, records, things like that, is big on magic. Now, of course, this isn't just unique to shinobi. The samurai culture is steeped in magic. I've talked about this a lot in my book, Samurai Traditions of the Tadagenji, and we've talked about this in countless videos. So, rituals. So the question would be, what kind of rituals should you, the modern day student, if you're trying to walk in the footsteps of shinobi, what kind of magical rituals would you have to participate in?
Without doubt, magic is part of ninja ways. Now, just to let you know, if Stephen's agreeable, we're going to do ninja Buddhism, ninja Shinto, ninja Zen, ninja magic. We can keep these videos going as much as you guys want, and we can do loads of them. We can just keep going, because me and Stephen have been doing this for 15 years now, but we can really start digging into these things. But you've got this layer here that we're talking about of your Buddhism and all that, but below that, the bedrock it's on is the Shinto. Now, the reason Stephen's got his theories on this, and I like his theories, I really do. I'm not just saying all the students' theories, I like them. But what I'm trying to say is, you've got to be careful with Shinto. Okay, you've got to be really careful. Everybody will tell you it's the indigenous religion of Japan, it's the oldest religion of Japan. Actually, no, not really. I call it the Chinese culture invasion, and basically it is hammered with Chinese culture all over the place. It is blended with all sorts. But on the whole, out there in the world are entities and gods, and they animate the world. The world is around you, is like a glowing, wonderful aspect, and there's different gods to placate, the god of the mountain, the god of the sea, and all that, and inside of that, and there's rituals to do. Okay, there's rituals to do, but beyond that is magic, which is all intertwined, and some of the Buddhist magic comes into it, and some of that Buddhist magic has got a bit of Daoist magic in, because Buddhism went through China. So it's not this, you're not going to see a wall of separate bricks, you're going to see a blended colour come together. And if you pull one of them bricks out, you can say, oh, that's probably Shinto with the dash of Daoism. Pull the other brick out and go, well, that's this and that. Actually, by the time you get to this point, you're blended. I look at ninja documents and I'm totally lost to where it comes from, because it isn't quite Shinto, Buddhism, Daoism. It isn't quite as easy as that, I promise you guys.
Okay, so then there's the obvious question of which rituals is one supposed to practice? And this is a delicate and difficult thing to answer. So the very first thing I'm going to say is to be in all seriousness, according within Buddhism, you are not supposed to do any of the esoteric rites or rituals unless you are a Buddhist, which means you have taken the refuge vows, and then you should also have taken your bodhisattva vows. And then you should have also taken your pratimoksha vows, even though Japan is weird because they kind of got rid of their pratimoksha vows, but that's a different video. And then you also need the tantric initiation into the rites and rituals. That's how it works normally. Indian Buddhism is very big on that. Japanese Buddhism is very lax on that. But I feel I need to say that's how, according to Buddhism, that's how it's supposed to work.
There is no doubt that the shinobi engaged in black magic, and everybody who jumps to the Christian, this is why the black's a Christian. No, it's not. The Japanese had an absolute distinction of what was either magic and what is not. Chikamatsu Shigenori states from memory, people of nowadays, or is it Kimura Sensei? Chikamatsu Sensei, recording Kimura Sensei's words, says, today people don't believe in these old ways and consider them heretical, dark, and thingy, because they don't understand them. But without doubt, magic and cray magic, like, first of all, you've got to go into, you can divide it between animal cruelty magic and cray magic. So you're talking about grinding things down, leaving things in the sun, writing Indian Sanskrit on things for a while, grinding it all down, and leaf hiding where you get powder and you're hiding there, chanting behind this, doing sort of things like that. Then of course you've got the ripping the eyes out of animals and while they're alive, or killing turtles while they're alive, scooping everything out, or a deer, killing a deer and stripping its skin and creating a talisman out of it, pulling the eyes out and putting them in red cloth and wrapping it up and putting it on your face. Or even I've found one recently, a face mask where the eyes are in it with kanji written down. Proper Japanese 1970s Japanese horror film stuff is absolutely. So you won't be going down that route because you'd be arrested, but at least be aware that you should be, if you are doing ninjutsu, practicing getting things from graveyards, soil from graveyards, moss from graveyards, practicing rituals in dark little rooms to go against your enemy. That's where you're going with it.
Having said that, I can then move on to sort of the generic answer, which says that, so for example, in Natoriru, there are lots of rituals. There's a Marishiten and the medicine Buddha. And now technically it is now medicine Buddha, it doesn't necessarily have to come from an esoteric practice or a tantra. So therefore it can be sutra based, which means that you can have a picture of the medicine Buddha, you can say the medicine Buddha's mantra, just know you haven't had the initiation, but you can still praise the name of the medicine Buddha, you can still ask the medicine Buddha for help, etc., etc. So like, for example, in the Bansen Shukai, when Fujibayashi says that before you go on a shinobi mission, you are supposed to basically, he talks about Jizo Bodhisatsu, which is a bodhisattva for pilgrims and for children. And he also talks about the sun and the moon. Now, the sun and the moon bodhisattvas are the attendants to the medicine Buddha. So therefore, when you go to the sun and moon bodhisattvas, that's also going to the medicine Buddha. And that's to keep you healthy and keep you safe. And if you die, is also to protect you from the lower realms. And then Jizo Bodhisattva or Siddhigarbha Bodhisattva is to protect you while traveling, and again to protect you in case you die. So therefore, there's one great example from the Bansen Shukai about going to the Bodhisattva of travelers and the Bodhisattva and the Buddha of medicine and his Bodhisattva attendants, and making offerings and doing prayers before you go on a mission, so that you're healthy, you don't get lost, and if you die, you don't fall into the lower realms. That is also connects to Natoriru, for example, because Natoriru has a lot of medicine Buddha aspects and also Marishiten aspects, but in this case we're talking about the medicine Buddha. And interestingly enough, the Natori were medics. Medicine Buddha, medics.
So you've got to be thinking when you before you go and do something, even if obviously you're not going to go on a real ninja mission, but if before you go training and all that, or if you're in a dojo and you don't see any of this, like I wonder if Akban and Ninja TV and all the other stuff, it would be great if you guys actually went to a temple and you did the prayers to a certain thing. So you never see that. Whereas I'm not comparing here, guys, but in Natori Ryu there is plenty of videos of me taking my students to a temple and doing the rituals, and then also having the rituals for the dead for the students, which we showed in a video recently, yeah. But this is what you should be doing. You're like, I've got to go to a ritual. See, there's almost no difference between a samurai ninja and a peasant and a whatever. They're all going to your local Buddhist temple and doing the rituals. And if you haven't got a temple, you put an altar at home. It doesn't matter. So but you do everything with a different intention. So Natori is, like Stephen said, medical. They have two things that they do: medicine and warfare. They're the main things. That's why you don't really find much martial arts in there. You find little tads of it, but you find medicine and warfare because that's the main things they do. And you get, and it's a Kusunoki tradition. And this is where me and Stephen lap over. He comes into the Natori, I go into his Kusunoki, and we've got a lap over there. But also, this is Book of Ninja, Bansen Shukai. I counted, there are more references to Kusunoki than there are to Iga or Koka. It is a Kusunoki tradition. It is about 60-70% Kusunoki tradition. But then, it's argued, are the traditions of Iga and Koka from Kusunoki anyway, or that, because no ninja says they were actually no, that's a lie. One that I can remember says ninjutsu was made in Iga. Or he might not even said it. I think he said it was from him, but it was developed in Iga from there. But most ninjas don't say ninjutsu is from Iga. They say we are the best at it, or people talk about them, say we are the best at it. They are the best at it. But actually, most of them praise Kusunoki and the Minamoto clan before that for ninjutsu. They don't even say we did it.
Then when we're talking about Marishiten, we know that this actually, of course, in Buddhism, there's the Marishiten Ongyo ritual, it's just there. But in terms of its application to shinobi or its history of samurai traditions, we know that this goes back to the Southern Court. With Go-Daigo Tenno's, or Emperor Go-Daigo, his son used the Marishiten Ongyo to hide. It's in the Taiheki. At the beginning of the Taiheki, he's hiding from shogun forces that are coming in to capture him, and he uses the Marishiten Ongyo. Then we see the Marishiten Ongyo in the Bansen Shukai. We also see the Marishiten Ongyo in other shinobi sources, and we see it again within Natori-ryu's sort of ritual documents, which I don't, sorry, Anthony, I know they're not released yet, but that's a little bit of spoiler alert. There's Marishiten rituals in there. Um, so therefore, I would say, so we just discussed medicine Buddha and we just discussed Marichiten. So therefore, someone who's practicing the shinobi arts, particularly if you are practicing this Natori Kusunoki sort of stream of shinobi, you should consider Marishi Ten and the Medicine Buddha.
Now, if you guys went and bought the Book of Samurai series more, we could get more Natori documents out. Again, just to let you know, basically, samurai culture and tradition is lowest now. Absolute lowest. So in terms of book sales, my How to Be a Modern Samurai outstrips everything. It is doing really, really well, and that's the book most people get, because with the culture we're living now, this is too difficult. But Stephen's got access to lots of my ninja scrolls and stuff like that, and don't forget, you get yourself a copy of Samurai Traditions of the Tadagenji. Natori students, get yourself a copy, help Stephen out, keep the Kusunoki stuff going. And I'm just going to call a bit of an interruption here, guys, but stick with it because Steve will be back in a few seconds. I am going to be in Michigan on November the 30th, and I'm going to be doing a seminar. I don't know if Stephen will be able to attend. I've not really worked that because it's not quite near him, but we are going to get a seminar going called Samurai Day 2024, and I'm hopefully, if we can get enough people there, do Samurai Day 2025, Samurai Day 2026. If we can we need to rebuild the samurai community. The samurai community is dead, guys. We are literally preaching to empty pews. It is literally dying. So let's try and rebuild it with historical samurai in place. So let's get back to Stephen and his wonderful beard. Stephen, your beard is outdoing mine now. I'm quite annoyed.
Now for Shinto, aka Daoism, because of course, yes, in Japan, Daoism, you have Onmyodo, which is proper court level Daoism, which is about astrological calculations and banishing evil spirits from the capital, etc., etc., etc. But the thing that people call Shinto now is really, back then during the days of the samurai and the shinobi, is really a amorphous combination of indigenous religious beliefs and Taoism. Again, don't take my word for it. If you really don't trust me, you can just look into yourself. When you see the Shinto, right, whether you look at like Yoshida style Shinto or Mononobe Ryu Shinto, it's Taoism. Okay, it's Taoism. It's about the five elements. It's about stepping in certain ways, holding a sword, stab to the left twice, spin, take 2 steps to the right. That's Taoism all day long.
This is where it gets complicated, guys, because I don't disagree with Stephen here, but I think we need to be more clear here, is that Shinto does exist as in like Japanese gods. They have their own gods, they have their own stuff. But what we have to be careful here is there's 2 types of Shinto, 2 types of Taoism on a very basic level, okay? You get Shinto that was there in Japan. We have the folk traditions of Japan, which are considered Shinto, the way of the gods. I don't know why it's never Shindo. Shindo, it's the Do. It's Dao. Do. You know what I mean? It's the way. So you've got the way of the gods, like they're in the streams, they're in this, they're doing this. And then you get, like Stephen said, the ritualistic stuff, which is very Daoist in nature. But then in Daoism, you get 2 types. You get the Lao Tzu's, a book of chain, Dao De Jing, Lao Tzu's Dao De Jing, yeah. And then where it's literally, the Dao is out there, it's the breathing membrane of the universal laws, not the laws of nature, the universal laws, and you can take from it any way you want. But below that, you've also got ritualistic Taoism, and they mix together. So ritualistic Taoism seems to have crossed over into ritualistic Shinto, and that sort of Taoism is there, but academically used in there. So it suddenly becomes a bit of a mix. So the people are doing Shinto, it's correct, but they're mixing it with ritualistic Taoism and things like this. So, but also then there's a problem that after the ninja and after the samurai, Japan made state Shinto, which removed everything it could out of Shinto to make it Japanese again. But of course, there's hidden Taoist elements there. So don't worry about it, guys. You don't have to get rid of it. Just be aware. Don't go around saying, "Oh, Shinto, the native religion of Japan, that's pure and never been influenced." It's nonsense. It's totally been influenced, and not only that, the temples, Buddhist temples, used to be combined as well. So just be aware of that. You don't have to step too deep into that though. But you should have a kamidana, which is your kami god shelf. That's number 1 thing.
So whether you call it Shinto or Taoism doesn't matter. It's ritual magic. And so, therefore, what type of ritual magic would a shinobi use? Well, we can look into the scrolls and find out. Unfortunately, the Bansenshu-kai's magic spells section is missing, which is very unfortunate. It's there in the table of contents, but no known copy has the magic section. So, but many other shinobi documents have magic. Fukushimaru has magic for using ghost to invade people's dreams, using magic to keep people from being able to ride their horses. We know that in the Tada Genji tradition and the Kusunoki tradition, magic related to bows and arrows. So, for example, using archery to dispel evil spirits. There's all kinds of rites and rituals, very simple ones to very complicated ones, such as, and everything from just plucking the bowstring to firing a special arrow in a special direction at a certain time, stepping a correct way onto the mat, stepping a correct way off of the mat, those kinds of things. So I would say, first and foremost, anyone who claims to be following in the footsteps of the shinobi needs to learn some basic samurai magic, such as bow and arrow magic, and just basic things about amulets and stuff like that.
Your first Daoist magical spell should be Rin Hyo To Sha Kai Jin Retsu Zai Zen Aun. Yep, that is the number one fundamental one. And we have traces of that back in Daoist literature before the samurai. And where, if I remember rightly, my friend John Hayter got it to me, where a wizard-esque Black Sabbath, the wizard is playing. Oh God, I've got to go in that. So anyway, yeah. Oh no, you've got the music song in my head now. And he's walking up the hill with mirrors on him, and he's got mirrors on his back, and he's doing that's it. It's the first spell you're going to learn, yeah. Then, like seems to start building in samurai magic. Now, this is an excellent butt plug for me, as I like to say. Excuse me, guys. Oh God, I've lost my bloody book now. Oh, there you are. So, as you can't tell, these are my adverts from behind. Please get yourself a copy of that on Audible. Audible is the way forward. Get yourself a copy of my new book, Samurai Death Cult. I had loads of problems with getting it sorted on Amazon with the search because it was wrong. But Samurai Death Cult, How to Be a Modern Samurai. But that's where you want to start with samurai magic. The dark side of Japan. That is just pull out some basic magic from there, and it's got all the talismans and stuff like that for this, that, and the other. So you want to be starting with kuji and juji, which is like Rin Hyo To Sha Kai Jin Retsu Zai Zen. That's the symbol for heaven, which will do certain things, and you get other symbols for different things. The symbol for big, for dragon, and they take you all over different areas. So go down that route, guys, and start building your ninja magic arsenal.
And then moving from that sort of basic foundation of samurai magic, of basic sort of, like exorcisms and amulets and protective rites and things like that. Then, of course, everybody, and I almost hate to say this, but I know everybody wants to hear it. So, yes, your kuji, your 9-character cuts. But I have to say that the 9-character cuts vary from tradition to tradition. So the Tada Genji's kuji is very different from the typical kuji that most people are familiar with. So kuji, even though I hate to say that. Yes, kuji. Beyond that, but again, that's a samurai thing. That's not a ninja thing, but you would have some knowledge of kuji. Spells related to invisibility. Now we talk about shinobi, so let's talk about spells related to, so amulets related to invisibility. Everything from dog eyes and crimson pouches to serpent fangs worn in your hair, things like that. Any sort of rite or ritual or magical amulet that is related to invisibility.
Back in the days when Gabriel Rosser used to engage with us all, which was AC's channel, was amazing. It was one of the best ninja channel out there. He did this one, which is basically shaving down the pin and speaking to the Buddhist spells up to the lunar moon and all this, the lunar eclipse. It was mint. So yes, Stephen obviously doesn't like kuji so much. He does, but he gets annoyed because when people do kuji just off the bat, right, it's like watching a cartoon about ninja. It's like, yeah. It's like Zen. They sit and do Zen, and we've heard and I'm listening to an audio book on Zen at the minute, and between me and you guys, keep it a secret, but my next book, which is out in August 2025, so in a year and 2 months, because I'm writing it now, is Zen based. Okay, so we're going to get a Zen book out of me. So basically you've got to be careful, because it can be a bit cartoonish without Zen and kuji and all that, without the understanding of the Buddhism below it and the different. You don't have to be an expert, guys. And I've got this quoted in basically in the Book of Samurai. It's like, you don't have to be a monk, you just have to have a good grounding in it. That's all you need. So make sure, guys, and if these videos do well, if you keep passing these videos around, me and Stephen are going to do more of these videos, and we'll give you that grounding in it. We'll go through, and Stephen get more complex with what he's trying to say, but we need you guys to pass this around and make sure you pass it. Put it to Akban and his people. Let's put it across to Ninja Dojo TV and all that sort of stuff, and get them on board and get everybody talking about the real ninja way.
Now, I'm not saying to go out there and pull the eyes out of a dog or to catch a snake and rip its fangs out or anything like that. But what I am saying is that it is kind of absurd to say that you follow in the footsteps of the shinobi, or that you're a modern day shinobi practitioner, or whatever it is that you say about yourself. But to say that and then not have a knowledge of all of these spells and amulets and these rituals. You have to understand, these rituals were a major part of the shinobi training. And so for you to not have the knowledge, or to at least know the recipes or know the procedure, is laughable. So therefore, at least learn the procedure, at least learn the ingredients, at least understand the rite or the ritual.
Now that you've had a good telling off of Stephen, sorry Stephen, yes, he's right. Get some, as I said, get the dark side of Japan, start getting a bit of rituals down. In my head, Stephen does, as you said, we've got Samurai Traditions of the Tadagenji. Stephen needs to write this book. He needs to write this How to Train in Ninjutsu book. Let's tell him he does. But basically, one of the greatest things is from Iga and Koka Ninja Tradition, Ninja Skills. And he's there telling you, like, these higher level magics. He says you can pass over gates and all that, but you need to learn the fingernail hiding and the leaf hiding and all this sort of stuff. You've got to be able to know it. And yes, I actually, guys, I failed at a magic spell. I tried doing a letter where I'd used the Shoninki's way of folding for better relationships. I actually backfired, and it was a worse relationship. So, you know, but the point of ninja magic is it's meant to have good strategy before, with ninja magic to supplement. So maybe my strategy was just not good enough. Don't know. But you've got to have a go at these things without killing animals. Just, unfortunately, we passed. Not unfortunately, I don't mean we should, but what I mean is we can't go back and do original things because the world has changed. You can't really be doing that. But it doesn't mean there's not tons of stuff you can do.
Right. So therefore, maybe you don't know how to actually, do exorcisms with bow and arrows, but learn the procedure. You don't know how to make amulets with bows and arrows. Learn the procedure. You're not going to actually rip a dog's eyes out or actually take a snake's fangs or whatever of the many, but learn the procedure. At least possess the knowledge of the procedure so that reality sits within your mind stream. But at the same time, I would say some of the magic is rather benign. Some of it's pretty harsh, but some of it's rather benign, or at least doesn't require you to kill something. So therefore, the question would be, if you're serious about shinobi arts, why would you not at least try it? Experiment, maybe. The Shoninki has a spell which can either bring people together or split them apart. Why don't you have the balls and try it? My point being that I find it rather interesting that so many people, they want to follow in the footsteps of shinobi, and they want to be like, nighttime assassins, all of this stuff, yet they are extremely hesitant to write a paper spell. It's a sort of laughable.
When I make these videos, I don't see Stephen's next video because they're so long. I've got to make them. But I did not know he was about to say that. He was like, "Why don't you ever go at the folding spell in the show?" And he goes, "I've just said that, Steve. I've just done that." I did that about 3 years ago, actually. But yes, and there's videos with me on my other channel, my Natori channel, where I'm sat with the monk and we're doing the spells of like the 3 little worms at the top that go off and tell and bring information back and all that. So why not? So my annoyance and Stephen's annoyance here is you get 15 years ago, me and Stephen were doing this, 15 years ago roughly, And me and Stephen sort of met. We've never actually met in real life, but we've met, we've talked for hours, like a pair of lovers. We've talked for hours and all that into the night. And but since then, the ninja community has changed, vastly changed. The last of the Bujinkan have sort of gone. The Bujinkan now, you don't really hear hardly anything of them. Hatsumi's obviously too old to keep it centrally focused, and it's broken up, and you don't hear him. But there isn't a new wave replacing it. But if that new wave should come, it is literally to go through the spells and go through the stuff and do it. That's why I'm mentioning, there's not many to mention. Akban, Ninja TV or Dojo TV, I can't remember the names. You know, I know even Let's Ask Shogo, he does, you know, I'll be honest with you, Let's Ask Shogo, I'm a bit disappointed with. He could have gone down the route of really pushing it, but it's gone a little bit ninja mad crazy, I don't know why. So why don't you be part of the first new wave? Have a go, do you know what I mean? New go at the new wave and see where we can go with it. Just means you're trying stuff. I know me and Stephen will have to do the videos to show you and all that, but it's time to have a go, I think.
This actually brings me to a very key point. Some people would say, well, I want to wear the dark clothes and I want to skulk around at night and stab people from the shadows and be all covert and everything, but I don't want to have anything to do with all that mumbo jumbo. Then I have to ask you a very key question. Why are you then trying to follow in the footsteps of a shinobi? If you don't care about the history or the culture, or you think that the belief systems are superstitious mumbo jumbo, you are negating some of the key fundamental things that make the shinobi unique. Otherwise, you're just talking about any guy who's just wandering around at night, sneaking in and out of places. That is not uniquely shinobi. Why are you interested in a samurai spy? Why are you interested in covert samurai who, as a fundamental part of the fiber of their being, had this sort of religious or spiritual tradition? If you're not interested in Buddhism or Shinto or Daoism or Confucianism, or you think magic is bullshit and you don't care, then honestly, shinobi isn't for you, because these things are fundamental parts of the shinobi way of life.
This sort of comes to the crux of why me and Stephen get a bit sort of annoyed, I suppose, with the ninja community. We get a lot of people who post this and post that and post quotes about this, and it's so far from actually doing the ninja path. Now, myself and Stephen, with the help of Yoshie and all them, have really spent the last decade and a half producing material for you guys to learn. And I know more than anyone that even if you bought all my books, there's only a handful of people I know of who actually really study out of them. And even when this video goes to Natori students, we do, if you want to join Natori Ryu, look at Natori Ryu Hub and you can join us. And basically, if you want to become a member, you get a number. It's a very small payment. It's a one-off payment. And then every week you get a lesson to do. And very few people do it. Just, you can literally dish it out and people do not want it. It's like, here's how to be a real, or follow in the footsteps of a real ninja. You can never really be a ninja. Here's how to follow in the footsteps of a ninja. Oh, I think I'll watch Netflix instead. It's your choice.
So before we run out of time, let's move over to the idea of Shinto deities. Yes, because shinobi are samurai in old Japan, Shinto, there's Shinto deities, no way around it. But the deities you would have some sort of working relationship with would be dependent upon your family, the tradition that you follow, the place that you live, etc., etc., etc. So for example, for Tada Genji, the clan deity, the Ujigami, is Hachiman Daibosatsu. But interestingly enough, for the Kusunoki tradition, Hachiman Daibosatsu is also a major deity of the Kusunoki tradition. So, and also for the Tada Genji, because it's Jingunden, therefore the sun goddess, so Amaterasu Okami, and also Susanoo, and then Okuninushi, Nigihayahi, etc., etc., etc. So each tradition, so which deities that you have a relationship with, Shinto deities, is going to be dependent upon whatever tradition you're working with. So if you're a Natori-ryu student, then I will let Anthony actually discuss that. So Anthony can tell you which Shinto deities or which deities are related to Natori-ryu.
Right. getting very confusing, isn't it? So there's lots of names being thrown at you. So if you ever look at the old Japanese temples and there's little statues of everything. Now, this is like medieval signs when you used to go through medieval Europe and the signs outside shops. There's the Black Swan shop, and there's the dried pig and the horse of the George and the dragon and all that. It's because a lot of the times literacy is quite high in Japan, but not that high. So you can literally identify each Buddha. So to me and you, they all look the same, but one of them will have a bead in this hand and his fingers, you know, in a hippie sort of way. And you'll be like, okay, that's that. The medicine, Natori, we were talking about the medicine Buddha, he's got the bowl in his hands, yeah? So without doubt, for Natori, to make it simple, you need to go Hachiman. He says it's the principal person you should be looking at, Hachiman, yeah? There's then the medicine Buddha, and then there's actually, and I'm going to be honest with you, I can't remember the name off by heart. It's a name I don't often say, but it's the serpent with the 98,000 gods of war serpent, which is one god, but inside of his scales, a great serpent god. You don't worry, guys, you shouldn't focus just on this, but you should have an array of them, because unlike Christianity, it is polytheistic basically, and you go to a different god for a different purpose. So if you want to do medicine, you go to the medicine god, but not already focus on medicine. But that doesn't mean if they were going somewhere else they wouldn't be chatting to someone else, because in there, like, and then you can't even argue that some of them, even they say, oh, there's a monotheistic element to it, whereas the one great Tao behind it and their manifestations of yin and yo become the Buddhist gods and all that sort of stuff, because it is very mixed in Japan, but you're getting into complicated territory there. But so they do have that, you know, the universe, blah blah blah. But I'm pushing this too far now. So basically, make sure you have a very basic understanding of, and it has to be very basic, of the gods, Buddhist gods and Shinto gods, really. That's what you're looking at. The Buddhist gods and the Shinto gods is what you're looking for. So just go on Wikipedia and look up Buddhist gods in Japan or something like that, and Shinto deities, something like that. It should be something around there for you to look at the different ones.
And let's sort of end this with Confucianism. Now, you have to understand, so Confucianism has been in Japan for a long time. A lot of people say it started in the 1600s. That's just not true. It was brought over from China when everything was brought over in China. So you're talking about 700s, 800s, things like that. But it wasn't really popular. You find it mentioned here and there. It pops up, you know, occasionally. But in the 1600s, 1700s, as most of you know, Confucianism becomes large, becomes huge, becomes foundational, fundamental to the government. Buddhism starts to get peeled back. Shinto gets an interesting boost, because by the late 1600s, Shinto is starting to become its own independent religion, and Buddhism is being pushed back, and Confucianism is being pushed forward. But what you need to know for Confucianism is really straightforward. There's a lot of different schools of Confucianism in Japan. So my suggestion is just read the basic Confucian text, the Analects, things like that, and just get a fundamental understanding of the basics of Confucianism. And only if you're seriously interested in Confucianism should you pursue the minute, complicated details of all the various different schools and traditions.
Confucianism is the difficult one, because it wasn't really massive in the 1500s when the shinobi are doing their stuff, but its echo is there in loyalty. So basically, Confucianism is how you act in society, the correct way to do things at the correct time. Okay, so you go to a Christian church and you pray to God, but you also know how to behave at a christening. When you should stand up, when you should sit down, when you should be quiet, when you're allowed to chat, at what volume should you chat. So Confucianism is a big part of Japanese history, but it sort of slips in. The ninja don't have much to do with it beyond they are aware of it, and it's a part of the structure of their society. But it's not, I would not say it's massive in there. And again, it gets massive after the shinobi are really doing their stuff. And mainly in Japan, it's about loyalty to superiors and knowing your place in society, which really was not what the shinobi were trying to do. Of course, they were loyal to their lords, but it was about destroying society and destroying other people's society and things like that.
And again, some of you may say, oh, wow, you really just cut out Confucianism and didn't speak on it a lot. And again, I would say study the basics of it, learn the basics of it. But here's the problem with Confucianism and the shinobi path. The shinobi's heyday doesn't necessarily crisscross with the surge of Confucianism of the Edo period. All right, so that's one issue. Second of all, a good study of Confucianism will help you understand the ideas behind a lot of the Edo period policies. But again, that's not exactly the heyday of the shinobi. And lastly, Japanese Confucianism, there's so many different schools, and some of them are just Buddhism repackaged. Some of them are very anti-Buddhist. Some of them don't care about Buddhism at all. Some are very pro-government. Some are very pro-population. But the point is when you're getting into that kind of Confucianism, you're getting more into like samurai leadership, and you're getting away from things that would probably have been anything the shinobi themselves would have been that much into. Now, arguably, anyone on the shinobi path during the 1600s, yes, they would have studied Confucianism and they would have had a particular school that they were linked to. But in the main, it can be very confusing, and especially if you don't know which school of Confucianism you should study. Therefore, maybe it's good to just have a fundamental basic understanding. And so, in conclusion, someone who follows in the footsteps of the shinobi should be engaged in Buddhism to some extent, Shinto to some extent, Daoism to some extent, Confucianism to some extent. It doesn't make sense to say that you're following the footsteps of the shinobi, but to be completely lacking this major fundamental aspect of what would have made them. In other words, there's a shinobi, 1500s, early 1600s. They are samurai spies, and they're going to be completely entwined, interwoven with the fabric of the place and time where they're existing, which means that these beliefs and superstitions and mythologies, whatever you want to call it, whether you believe it's real or whether you believe it's fake, the point is the shinobi were completely engaged and built from the ground up, from their very fibers, built from this landscape, built from these beliefs, built from these worldviews. So therefore, if you truly are trying to follow in the footsteps of the shinobi, you can't neglect this aspect. It's like trying to say, oh, I study in the footsteps of the shinobi, but I completely ignore anything samurai. What? That's absurd. It's equally absurd to say, oh, well, I study the shinobi path, but I don't do anything with Buddhism, Shinto, Daoism. I don't do anything with any kind of foreign religion. It doesn't make any sense.
Now, this is where, again, me and Stephen get a bit annoyed, basically. So we see a lot of ninja, even though there's not many of them left, the ninja groups nowadays tend to have the black gi, the black karate belt, and which is something that really annoys me. And then they do the sort of throwing around in the dojo, and they'll bang out the kuji, which again, I said you can at least start with kuji. They bang out the kuji, and that's about as far as it goes, really. Now, my number one, my guy Andrew Throburn, he helped me put together. We had to pay for one of the natural rituals to be translated separately from like a guy, just because of time limits. We got that done, and then had it checked by our monk and all that, and gone through, and and then didn't change it, but we tried to the bits that were difficult, we made a decision on. And then we now have that as our intro ritual, which we try to get students to produce and do. And it's a very long, it's like a 6-minute ritual. And I cannot do it from heart. Yeah, Andrew can. I can't, because I'm building a bloody house. But I should really push on with that. But that's the type of things we get into. So just having a black gi, having a black belt, knowing the Aikido terms, and knowing the, or whatever, going to your sort of dojo, you go to your dojo, coming home with your green belt on or whatever, it's just not enough, guys. You've got to build it the other way up. You've got to build it the other way up. Your fundamental, what happens is it makes a mental change the way you approach ninjutsu. The ninjutsu at the end, and then taijutsu, and then kenjutsu is the tail end of a much more forceful thing. You can still die easily by someone stabbing you without you knowing, but your whole being is totally different. It's like the kenjutsu is the sharp point of a spike going up that you are built on a really solid iron base, whereas if you just do this bit, you're just a needle. And yes, it's a bit, it's not got that power behind it, faith in the afterlife, things like that, you know. So let's finish off with Stephen.
But beyond learning just the fundamental basics, of course, that's where you have to start. The fundamental basics of Buddhism, Shinto, Daoism, Confucianism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A working knowledge of the different amulets and spells, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then if you're really serious about following in the footsteps of the shinobi, you then have to learn the specifics of whichever tradition it is you're following. Because there is no just generic, oh, I study the way of the samurai, I study the way of the shinobi. That's just too generic. It's absurd. It would be, I study this particular tradition. I study this particular line of teachings. Even if you don't, even if you're just reading books about it, you're still reading books about a particular line or a particular, because each line is going to have its own unique history, its own unique circumstances, its own specific set of beliefs. So, for example, you Natori students, you would need to know, well, what is a Natori-ryu? What is the worldview of Natori-ryu? What are the religious teachings of Natori-ryu? What are the rituals and the amulets of Natori-ryu? You would need fundamentally basic understandings of Japanese religious institutions in general. But then at some point, you got to get into the specifics of the tradition.
Right, okay, that's the last from Stephen. He never says goodbye. So rude. So he says, bye, folks. So, right. Lots of complex things there. You can go back over this video, watch it again, write down some points that you like. But just to remember to support Stephen. So just supporting Stephen, get yourself a copy of Samurai Traditions of the Tadegenji. Yeah? Get yourself a copy of this. Do help him out by Stephen Nojiri. Now, if you want to start, if you're like, where do I really start with all this, Anthony? That. How to be a modern samurai is your starting point. Okay? How to be a modern samurai. Start there. Read that. It's on Audible. That's fine. Then, because for this video only, because we're talking about ninja magic and religion and spirituality, you want to go down that route, the dark side, just to get an idea. That's not the book I would recommend for all of your base training. We'll get onto that later. But they're the two you want to, that and that, for getting involved, and then, right, where do I go for my magical training? And pick out, because it is that's the thing Stephen's saying is, you've got the foundation of your society that you live in. You've got the temple that you brought up with your family in. But then you've got what you choose. Lots of these samurai schools just chose different spells. I remember, I think it was Serge Moll or someone identified where he thinks, and I've never followed up on this, the Natori spells came from. And then one of his conclusions is, they're not shinobi spells. But that was an erroneous conclusion, because there is no such thing as a shinobi spell. Shinobi use Japanese spells to do a certain thing. So this, that's a problem. So guys, that's where we're up to. Now, what I'm going to do, don't forget I'm in America on the 30th of November in Michigan, Detroit Rock City. So the information will be in the information box below, and I'll try and pin it in the pinned comment. So do come on, get that sorted, come along, have a go. And what I would do for you is go back, have a look at this video again, write some points down and ask some questions. Me and Stephen are going to start answering the best 5 questions from different videos. So can you write your questions down below, and in the future we're going to do a questions and answer video. So and we'll start logging a few of them, so have a think. My name's Antony Cummins. Thank you very, very much for watching this long, and I hope you enjoy it. Don't forget, help build the ninja community, pass this around.